At Millstone High, teachers came and went like the seasons. Some couldn't handle the pressure. Others just looked the other way when things got rough. But there was one teacher the students never really figured out, Miss Carter. She was young, maybe 27, with a quiet voice and calm eyes that seemed to notice everything. She taught history, dressed simple, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that didn't need loud words or threats. Most students didn't know much about her, except that she smiled politely, stayed after class for anyone who needed help, and never raised her voice. And that made her the perfect target for Kyle Brennan. Kyle was a senior and the unofficial king of the school. Big, loud, and backed by a crew of followers who laughed at every cruel joke. He loved making people squirm, especially teachers. He had embarrassed substitutes, made veteran staff walk out in frustration, and somehow, always talked his way out of real punishment. His father was on the school board. His mother chaired the PTA. Kyle knew he was untouchable. Until the day he tried to humiliate Miss Carter. It started like any normal Thursday. The hallways were packed between classes, lockers slamming, voices echoing off the walls. Miss Carter was standing at her locker near the staff lounge, placing some folders inside, her back to the crowd. Kyle spotted her from across the hall. "Watch this," he whispered to his friends. He strolled up behind her, grinning wide, and in one swift motion, grabbed the back of her blouse and yanked hard, ripping it clean down the seam. The sharp sound of tearing fabric sliced through the hallway noise. For half a second, silence fell. A few students gasped. Some opened their mouths, ready to laugh. But before a single sound escaped, Miss Carter spun around. Her eyes locked onto Kyle's with a look that wasn't shock or fear. It was something else. Something sharp. Something cold. And in the blink of an eye, she moved. Nobody saw exactly how it happened. One moment Kyle was standing there, his smirk half-formed, and the next, his arm was twisted behind his back, his knees buckling. A sharp crack echoed down the hall. Kyle screamed, dropping to the ground. Miss Carter stood over him, calm as ever, holding his wrist at an angle no arm should bend. Her voice was steady, low, cutting through the stunned silence. "You will never touch me or anyone else like that again." Teachers rushed over. Students backed away, their faces pale. Principal Dalton arrived within minutes, eyes wide with disbelief. Kyle was sobbing, cradling his broken arm, his arrogance shattered along with it. The fallout was immediate. Kyle's parents stormed the school, threatening lawsuits. But what they didn't expect was the security footage, clear as day, showing Kyle assaulting a teacher. And they certainly didn't expect what came next. Because Miss Carter? She wasn't just a history teacher. She was a former military close combat instructor, honorably discharged after serving overseas. She had been certified in self-defense training for years. Her action wasn't aggression. It was protection, a textbook response to a physical attack. The story exploded across the school. Students who once whispered about Miss Carter now stared at her with respect and a little awe. Kyle faced expulsion and legal charges. His parents' influence couldn't save him this time. The school board stood with Miss Carter. The community did too. Parents wrote in, praising her for standing up for herself, and for setting a powerful example for every student who had ever been bullied. But what mattered most was the quiet shift that happened in the hallways after that day. The bullies grew quiet. The laughter at other people's expense faded. Students began speaking up for each other more. The silent ones, the ones who were always targets, started walking with their heads a little higher. Miss Carter kept teaching. She kept smiling her quiet smile. But now, when she walked the halls, she wasn't just the teacher students ignored. She was the one they admired. And as for Kyle, well, he learned the hard way that power built on fear crumbles when faced with real strength. Because real strength doesn't shout. Real strength stands firm, even when someone tries to rip it away. The days following the incident felt different at Millstone High. For the first time, students weren't talking about parties, gossip, or meaningless rumors. They were talking about her, Miss Carter. Some called her a legend. Others whispered about her military background. A few even admitted they felt safer knowing a teacher like her walked the halls. But Miss Carter didn't care about the attention. She came to school on Monday the same way she always did, hair tied back, simple blouse, folder in hand. She greeted students with a nod, answered questions in class, and helped those who stayed behind after the bell. But now, when she walked the halls, people stepped aside. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Even the quietest students, the ones Kyle used to pick on, lifted their heads a little higher. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside them. One afternoon, a freshman named Lila stopped Miss Carter after class. "Miss Carter," she said softly, "thank you for standing up for yourself." Miss Carter smiled gently. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the first step to standing up for others. Lila nodded, her eyes shining. That moment stayed with her, and many others. Meanwhile, Kyle Brennan wasn't seen around much. The injury and the humiliation forced him out of school for weeks. His family tried to spin the story, blaming the system, blaming the school, even blaming Miss Carter. But with the video evidence, public opinion turned fast. By the time Kyle returned, the students who once cheered for him now barely acknowledged him. His arrogant walk turned into a lowered gaze. He had been the predator, until the day his prey became stronger than him. Miss Carter never gloated. She never even mentioned the incident again. But one afternoon, she passed by Kyle in the hallway. She stopped. Looked him straight in the eye. "You may not remember this when you're older," she said quietly, "but I hope you remember this. You're stronger when you use your power to protect, not to hurt." Kyle didn't respond. He just nodded, and kept walking. Word spread even beyond Millstone High. The story made local news. Parents spoke about it at meetings. Teachers around the district praised Miss Carter's actions as a stand against bullying and harassment. But through it all, Miss Carter remained the same. Calm. Firm. Unshaken. Because that's what true strength is. It's not the loudest voice in the room. It's the quiet one that refuses to back down when it matters most. By the end of the year, something incredible happened. Bullying reports dropped. Students started organizing peer support groups. Teachers felt more respected. The school climate changed. And though Miss Carter never asked for recognition, the principal announced her as Teacher of the Year, not for breaking Kyle's arm, but for breaking the cycle of fear. In her acceptance speech, she said only one thing. Power is not about control. It's about responsibility. And courage starts with standing up when it would be easier to stay silent. The auditorium erupted in applause. And somewhere in the crowd, even Kyle Brennan stood and clapped. Miss Carter's influence didn't just stay inside the walls of Millstone High. Weeks later, a group of students started a campaign called Stand Tall, a simple idea encouraging students to stand up for each other and report bullying. It began with a few posters, then turned into weekly meetings in the library. Survivors of bullying shared their stories. Friends supported each other. Even shy students found a place where they felt safe. Miss Carter never claimed the spotlight. She sat at the back, listening, sometimes offering quiet advice. She let the students lead. And they did, with a strength they didn't even know they had. One afternoon, during a Stand Tall session, a boy named Marcus stood up. He was known for being quiet, often the target of jokes about his weight and stutter. But that day, his voice didn't shake. "I used to think I had to take it. That if I fought back, it would make me just like them," Marcus said. "But Miss Carter showed me, standing up isn't about hurting anyone. It's about showing you won't let anyone take away your dignity." The room fell silent, not out of pity, but out of respect. People clapped. Marcus smiled for the first time in a long while. And somewhere deep inside, Millstone High changed forever.